We have this tweet from Benny Johnson. Elon Musk calls the suppression of the Hunter Biden laptop story election interference. Quote, some of these conspiracy theories have turned out to be true. I'm going to play this clip for you, but I just want to stress this one point. As we're talking about the Durham report and the interference in our election and Trump's presidency from 2016 till 2020, we also get to talk about the second election interference from intelligence agencies when they sought to suppress and did suppress the Hunter Biden laptop story. Here's Elon Musk giving an interview on the matter.
Of this. I mean, you do some tweets that seem to be, or at least give support to some who would call others conspiracy theories.
Well, yes, but I mean, honestly, some of these conspiracy theories have turned out to be true.
Which ones?
Well, like the Hunter Biden laptop.
That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was a pretty big deal. There was Twitter and others engaged in active suppression of information that was relevant to the public. That's a terrible thing that happened. That's election interference.
And also what wasn't mentioned by Elon was that the intelligence agency signed off on this letter, which was then weaponized by people in the media who willfully lie to manipulate. This is once again a very similar story of election interference from intelligence agencies, Democrats, and the media. There is no country unless these people are criminally charged, arrested, and removed from polite society because they are criminals who engage in criminal activity.
But have you considered that it's just an accident and they're sorry?
Oh, they're sorry?
Mm-hmm.
Well, now I feel bad, Seamus.
Yeah, I mean, it was
Let them go.
It was a mistake. That's why pencils have erasers.
See, I feel like they're not sorry. They're just like, we did some stuff wrong and we changed our own rules so we won't do anything wrong again. But we don't know that they've changed the rules to... now they've changed the rules to permit them to act the way they did. They've just legalized their actions probably.
And I love this rationalization that you get from the left where they'll say, okay, like, we were vehemently wrong about this every step of the way. And we did try to ruin people's lives and we did misinform the American people. But we didn't mean to.
Pandemic amnesty.
And we saw, exactly. We saw it during the pandemic. We saw it during Russiagate. We see this with the left all of the time. It's like, okay, well, if you're wrong about everything all the time, I kind of don't care if you were lying or not. Yeah. I know that I can't trust you ever.
They're just sorry you figured it out. They're not sorry they did it. Exactly.
And this is how it works. You never admit you're wrong. Mm-hmm. You move on to the next scam. That's how scammers work, right? A scammer doesn't go okay, so wasn't really a Nigerian prince, but I am trying to call you about your car's extended warranty.
So should we...
They just move from the Nigerian prince thing to your car's extended warranty without ever talking to you about the first thing or admitting that they were wrong. Yeah.
It's like, you're not a Nigerian prince, click. Yeah. Your phone rings again. I'd like to talk to you about your car's extended warranty. Really?
It's like, oh, well.
I feel like we should just start our stopwatches and see what big revelation is going to come out to distract us from this. Mm-hmm. Because that's, I feel like, how you can tell time in America.
Well, more importantly, I wonder what the next big election interference is going to be in 2024.
Well,
what lie will they push next?
Well, and this is what's so wild, right? So over 10% of Biden voters, according to surveys, not only did not know that the Hunter Biden laptop story was a thing because of how suppressed it was. They said if they had known about it, they would not have voted for Joe Biden. Okay, the idea that 10% of Biden voters surveyed, if that really does apply to the rest of the voting population, would not have swayed the election.
Well, what's your source?
Washington Examiner. There was a poll that they published right after the election.
I just want to make sure we have the number correct.
Yeah. I actually think it might have been more than 10%. So
more
I can pull this up.
I remember Rasmussen had one that was like 6 or 7%.
Okay.
Either way, it's substantial.
Either way, it's a substantial amount. It's enough people to theoretically swing the election, depending on where they're centered or where they're based. Now,
that's called evil.
That is evil. That is clear corporate interference in American elections. And I would say that that's actually more heinous than non-government actors in Russia spending $46,000 on Facebook ads, not all of which were from one single partisan perspective. On top of that, we had actual elected leaders referring to that as an act of war, an act of war. So what do we call it when American corporations do the exact same thing on a much larger scale, which there's actually good polling data to indicate did sway the election?
Well, and they're doing it on a much larger multi-hundred million dollar, almost $1 billion scale when it comes to groups like the Center for Tech and Civic Life, getting money from the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative. When you talk about the lie that they're going to peddle, I think universal mail-in voting, I'm sure there'll be some sort of public health emergency that necessitates rolling that up. But it's interesting. I put a story up today. So obviously the Center for Tech and Civic Life the Zuckerberg-funded election group. They had to sort of rebrand since they came under a bunch of scrutiny during the 2020 election. But one of their new groups, it's called the Alliance for Election Excellence. It's a very good name. But they're now they have an $80 million war chest, and they're now giving like $500,000 grants to local election offices across the country, and they're buying them, catch this, office space to store mail-in ballots and to also store election tabulation machines. So they're up to their old tricks.
Nice of them.
So I know, I'm sure, very altruistic. Anything Mark Zuckerberg does is marked by altruism.
And if it's not altruistic, it was an accident.
Of course.
He did it.
And
He's
maybe
sorry, and he's really sorry.
Sorry you found out.
Sorry.
Yeah,
it was an
they
accident.
all just
Remember, he
simultaneously
said he
flipped on these
wasn't
banana peels.
gonna give any money to the 2024 election cycle. He's like, yeah, me and my wife, like, peace out, we're done. But no, they just use another shady
Well, he's not
nonprofit,
giving
dark
it to
money.
the election.
Do you-
he's giving it to someone to give to the election.
Do you remember when he
It's like
he
Fauci and
reportedly
EcoHealth Alliance and COVID. Right?
Zuckerberg reportedly gave all his money away or something like that.
What?
But it turned out he put it in an LLC to avoid the death tax and the inheritance tax. Something like that happened. I could be wrong, but they were like, "Wow, Zuckerberg's giving away all his money," and then they were like, "Yeah." To a company so that when he dies, it doesn't get taxed at 50%.
Yeah, it was like the Patagonia thing. Their founder was like, we're going to give all of our money away. And it's like, oh, actually, they get a huge tax credit for doing this. They're not here to save the planet. They're here to help themselves.
And the sad thing is, if he said it, he was doing it to avoid taxes, it would be way cooler, right? Like, I might actually appreciate that. If he's going to lie about giving it to the poor, okay, well, you're a slimy guy. You're lying about giving money to the poor. If he was just honest about it, look, this horrible government that does horrible things and is going to spend this money on nonsense isn't going to get a penny of it. I'd go, yeah, I get it. I understand.
They all do this. These wealthy individuals will be like, I'm going to donate 99% of my money. And then, like, you'll get a guy named, Seamus Coughlin, who's a billionaire.
Yeah.
And he'll be like, I'm going to donate $999 million to charity. And then he'll start a charity called the Seamus Coughlin Foundation, and I'll donate it to himself.
Exactly.
That way he can write off all of the income and then have it as a nonprofit and then keep the money.
Well, fun fact, there are actually studies that show inheritance taxes increase income inequality because the lower classes inherit a larger percentage of their net worth than the upper class does. Mm-hmm. And so usually what inheritance taxes actually do is just completely screw farmers over, because a person has a farm that they spent their entire life working on. And yeah, like the farm and the farming equipment are rather expensive, but a lot of these people are just making a normal middle class living. And then they have to pay this insane inheritance tax before they can pass it on to their children. So they end up having to sell their land off.
Yeah, that's why a lot of firms go into trust, right? They do it to
Right.
avoid having to go through the process.
Or LLCs, but trusts. Clever ways they avoid paying taxes.
But for those who can't avoid it, or for those who don't know better than to avoid it, or even people, outside of the context of farming who just have a house and they don't know how to leave it to their kids without avoiding the taxes, they end up getting screwed. Millionaires and billionaires are going to find their way around any set of taxes, right? Just like Zuckerberg did, but poor people are not.
Buying things as a rich person is not the same as buying things as a poor person.
Nope.
If you're a poor person who needs a car, you save up 10%, you go to the car dealership, you say, I want this, $20,000 car. They say, okay, it's $2,000 down, and then you take out a loan for the other 18, and then you got to pay a certain percentage on it. So you are losing money on your asset. By the time you finally get that asset, you've ended up paying double for it. So you've lost tens of thousands. If you're rich, you walk in, write a check, boom, you have the car. The car's value effectively stays the same. Let's use a better example, like land or property.
Yeah.
If you're poor and you're buying a house, you get a loan, you pay interest, you lose money to the banks to acquire this. After 30 years or whatever, you finally pay it off. You're like, I did it. I paid off my house. And you've lost twice the value of the house in the purchase. So basically, you only retain half of the value of your own money. You're rich and you got cash. Snap your fingers, you buy it, you retain all of the value. Not the same thing. And then they do these tricks where, they can give the money to their own kids.
Well,
But-
and who gets the value? The rich, the banks.
Yep. The Federal Reserve, I guess. But I guess this isn't supposed to be Occupy Wall Street cast. We are talking about election interference. Don't complain about. But hey, Steve talks about this stuff all the time.
I was going to say.
Yeah.
He wants to tax all these people.
I don't agree with these wealth tax stuff, but he's adamant on the
Well,
wealth
you have
tax.
to, because
I
if not,
don't,
they're gonna use the money to fund all of these groups, like the
true.
election rigging groups, whatever you want to call them. And I've always supported. That was one of the first policies that Steve had pushed back when I was in high school, watching him speak. I think at the Oxford Union, and I was like, "This is so right." And what's so funny is, put aside, I always love talking to Uber drivers, Democrat, Republican, and like that's the one issue that they can always get behind is that taxing the rich but actually taxing them substantively and meaningfully and making the policy so it's not just that the hyper-connected rich they don't have to pay their fair share, but it's everyone.
But then the government gets the money and gives it to the FBI.
Yeah, exactly.
So therein lies the problem.
Then you have to defund the FBI.
Well, yeah, that's my concern.
Trump's gotta
Not
win.
the child
I think-
sex trafficking operation, but the rest of the FBI, yes.
Yeah, well, like with the FBI, with all of these institutions, and it's not even just the deep state, it's the government overall, as Tim alluded to, it's all incredibly corrupt. They spend our money horribly. I understand what you're saying. Wealth taxes make me nervous for a number of reasons. I think, in principle, my main belief, I would say economically, is in property ownership. And I don't just mean that in like a strictly laissez-faire sense. I think the more people who own property, the better off we are as a country. I think it gives everyone a stake in the future. A country of property owners is obviously better than a country of renters. I'm a very big believer in the middle class and lower class being able to own property. And I think a lot has to be done in order to make that a realistic possibility for people in the future. But with wealth taxes, I mean, the issue is with unrealized capital gains, you're taxing something that doesn't actually exist yet. So then someone has to sell off a portion of their company. And if it was just people who are ultra wealthy, I could sort of understand, but that always trickles down, right? Anytime the government says we're only going to tax people above a certain limit, they end up lowering that bar until eventually we're all paying that wealth tax.
The initial income tax was like 3%, and it was only for the ultra wealthy.
Exactly.
And now here we are with poor people paying 20%. Thanks for watching this clip from the Timcast IRL podcast. Hang out with us live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. and become a member over at timcast.com for uncensored, members-only shows exclusive. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll see you all next time.